no secretary survived a week with a millionaire until his divorced ex-wife arrived. The 25-year-old tech genius sat in his glass corner office on the 40th floor, staring at the empty desk outside his door. Again, the nameplate read executive assistant, but it might as well have said danger zone with how fast people ran from this job. Have you ever worked for someone who pushed every button you had? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The tech millionaire who made grown assistants quit in tears finally met his match. A temp who could handle his impossible demands. What he didn't know was that she was wearing the divorce papers he'd refused to sign, tucked inside her portfolio. Because Harper Green wasn't just another secretary. She was Harper Callahan, the wife who walked away from his empire 2 years ago. Have you ever wondered what happens when the person who broke your heart becomes the only one who can save your career? Have you ever worked for someone who pushed every button you had? Or maybe you've had to face an ex when you thought you'd never see them again. Today's story is about a man who built walls so high, he forgot the woman who helped lay the foundation. But what happens when those walls come crashing down, and the truth about their past threatens to destroy everything he's built? Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button because this story will challenge everything you think you know about second chances. Let me take you back to a rainy Tuesday morning in Manhattan, where Roman Callahan was about to discover that some ghosts refused to stay buried. 15 assistants in 6 months. That was Roman Callahan's record. The 25-year-old tech genius sat in his glass corner office on the 40th floor, staring at the empty desk outside his door. Again, the nameplate read executive assistant, but it might as well have said danger zone with how fast people ran from this job. Roman's morning routine never changed. Black coffee at exactly 7:30 a.m. Financial reports sorted by profit margins. 17 different notifications demanding his attention before most people even woke up. His AI company, Calltech Solutions, was worth $200 million. He'd built it from nothing in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, surviving on pizza and pure determination. But success came with a price nobody talked about. Mr. Callahan, his head of HR, Janet, knocked on his door. "We need to discuss the assistant situation." Roman didn't look up from his screen. What situation? The lawsuit situation. The crying in the bathroom situation. The 3 assistants who quit via text message situation. Janet's voice got sharper with each word. "The board is asking questions." Roman finally lifted his eyes. "I'm not difficult. I just have standards." Standards don't explain why Amy Chen locked herself in the supply closet and called her therapist. Standards don't explain why Marcus literally ran out of the building yesterday. The truth was simpler and more complicated than Roman wanted to admit. He wasn't just demanding, he was testing everyone, pushing them to see if they'd stay when things got hard. Because the one person who mattered most had walked away when he needed her most. "Fine," Roman said, closing his laptop. "Give me someone new. I've already tried every agency in Manhattan. Nobody wants to work for you anymore." Janet placed a folder on his desk. "Except one person, a temp from Queens. She specifically requested this position." Roman raised an eyebrow. "Someone actually asked for this job? She said she likes challenges. Starts Monday." As Janet left, Roman opened the folder. The application was clean, professional, almost too perfect. Harper Green, age 23, previous experience with high-pressure executives. References that checked out. Background clean, but something bothered him about the photo. Those eyes looked familiar in a way that made his chest tight. The temp agency called with one last candidate. "She's different," they said. She specifically asked for the impossible cases. She walked into his office like she owned the place. Roman looked up from his computer Monday morning and forgot how to breathe. The woman standing in his doorway wore a navy blue dress that was professional but not boring. Her hair was shorter than he remembered. Wait, remember from where? And she carried herself with quiet confidence. "Mr. Callahan, I'm Harper Green, your new assistant." She extended her hand for a shake. "I understand you have high expectations." Roman shook her hand, noting the firm grip, the way she looked him directly in the eye. Most people are intimidated by those expectations. I'm not most people. Within the first hour, Harper had reorganized his calendar, rescheduled 3 meetings that were double booked, and somehow convinced his biggest client to extend their deadline by 2 weeks. She moved through his office like she already knew where everything belonged. "How did you know my coffee order?" Roman asked, staring at the perfect cup she'd placed on his desk. "Lucky guess." Harper's smile was polite but guarded. "Black coffee, no sugar, extra hot." Roman studied her face. Something about her mannerisms, the way she tilted her head when concentrating, felt like déjà vu. "Have we met before?" "I don't think so. I would remember." But Harper's fingers trembled slightly as she sorted through his mail. She avoided looking at the bookshelf where he kept his personal items. And when she cleaned off his desk, she carefully moved around a small picture frame he always kept face down. "This is impressive," Roman said, watching her work. "You handled that conference call better than my last 3 assistants combined." "Experience helps." Harper's voice was steady, but Roman caught her glancing at the door like she was planning an escape route. "Where did you work before this?" "Different places. Nothing as big as call tech." Roman wanted to press for details, but Harper's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her whole demeanor changed. Her professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked like worry. "I need to take this," she said, stepping into the hallway. Roman tried to focus on his work, but his attention kept drifting to Harper's muffled voice through the glass. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was gentle, almost motherly. When she returned, her eyes were softer. "Everything okay?" Roman asked. "Just fine." Harper smoothed down her dress and picked up her notepad. "What's next on your schedule?" As she organized his desk, her fingers lingered on a small frame he kept face down. She knew exactly what was in that photo. Have you ever had to pretend you didn't know someone who once meant everything to you? Tell us in the comments. Roman couldn't shake the feeling he'd seen those eyes before. That night, he sat in his penthouse apartment, staring at the city lights and thinking about Harper's familiar smile. Something about her made him restless in a way he hadn't felt in years. He reached for the chain around his neck, feeling the weight of the wedding ring that hung there like a secret. 2 years ago, he'd lived in a different world. A studio apartment in Brooklyn with thin walls and a radiator that clanked all night. But it was home because she was there with him. Harper Callahan had been 21 then, fresh out of college with big dreams and bigger heart. She believed in him when call tech was just lines of code on a secondhand laptop. She'd brought him coffee during all-nighters and celebrated every small victory like it was the lottery. "You're going to change the world," she'd whispered one night, curled up next to him on their tiny couch. "We're going to change the world," he corrected, kissing her forehead. But success had a way of changing people. The bigger Roman's company grew, the longer his hours became. Client dinners replaced date nights. Board meetings took priority over breakfast together. He justified it all as building their future, but Harper saw it differently. "You're not the same person I married," she'd said during their last fight. "You've become someone who cares more about stock prices than the people who got you there. That's not fair. Everything I'm doing is for us." "No, Roman. Everything you're doing is for you." The divorce papers had been served on a Thursday. Harper had packed her things while he was at work, leaving only a note that said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." Roman had kept the ring, telling himself it was just expensive jewelry. But late at night, when the penthouse felt too quiet, he'd hold it and remember what it felt like to be loved by someone who saw potential instead of profit. Now, watching Harper Green move through his office with practiced efficiency, Roman felt that old ache in his chest. The way she organized his files, the way she anticipated his needs before he voiced them. It was like muscle memory. He pulled out his phone and opened a browser, typing carefully, "Harper Callahan, Brooklyn, New York." The search results made his hands shake. Social media profiles that hadn't been updated in 2 years. A wedding photo from a local newspaper society page. And then nothing. Like Harper Callahan had vanished from the internet entirely. Roman switched to a different search. Harper Green, Queens, New York. This time, the results were different. A lease agreement from 18 months ago. A voter registration from last year. Harper Green existed, but only recently. He pulled out his phone to search for Harper Callahan on social media. The results made his blood run cold. Harper Green didn't exist 2 years ago. Roman spent the entire night digging through public records, social media archives, and professional databases. Every search told the same story. Harper Green had appeared in the system exactly 18 months ago, like she'd been born fully formed with a credit score and a Queen's address. But Harper Callahan, his Harper, had disappeared at the exact same time. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. The timeline matched perfectly with their divorce finalization. Harper had legally changed her name, started over completely, and somehow ended up working for the man she'd left behind. Roman arrived at the office early, coffee in hand and questions burning in his throat. But when Harper walked in at exactly 8 a.m., her professional smile firmly in place, he found himself speechless. "Good morning, Mr. Callahan. I've already confirmed your 9 a.m. with the marketing team and moved your lunch meeting to accommodate the client call from Tokyo." She moved around his office like she belonged there, straightening papers and adjusting his calendar with practiced ease. Roman watched her every movement, looking for cracks in her performance. "Harper," he said her name deliberately, watching for a reaction. "Yes, sir. How long have you been in New York?" "A few years." Her answer was too quick, too rehearsed. "I love the city. Ever spend time in Brooklyn?" Harper's hand stilled for a fraction of a second. Who hasn't? Great pizza scene over there. Roman leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "What about North Carolina? Ever been to Raleigh?" This time, Harper's reaction was unmistakable. Her shoulders tensed, and she turned away to file papers that were already perfectly organized. "Can't say that I have. Is there something specific you need help with today?" The deflection was smooth, but Roman caught the slight tremor in her voice. He knew that voice. He'd heard it laugh at his terrible jokes, whisper his name in the dark, and break when she said goodbye. "Actually, yes." Roman stood up, walking around his desk until he was close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "I need you to be honest with me." Harper met his gaze steadily. "About what? About why you're really here?" During lunch, Roman followed her to a small cafe. The conversation he overheard changed everything. The voice on the other end of Harper's phone call made Roman's world stop. Roman had followed Harper 3 blocks to a small cafe in Midtown, staying far enough behind to avoid detection. He told himself he was being ridiculous, but the mystery was eating him alive. Harper sat at a corner table, her lunch untouched, phone pressed to her ear. "I know, sweetie, but Mommy has to work late again tonight." Harper's voice was softer than Roman had ever heard it. "Mrs. Rodriguez will pick you up from daycare, okay?" Roman's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "Daycare? Yes, I promise we'll go to the park this weekend. And we'll get ice cream if you're good for your teacher." Harper laughed, and the sound cut through Roman like a blade. "I love you too, baby. Be good." Roman sat in stunned silence, his mind racing. Harper had a child who called her mommy, who went to daycare, who was promised ice cream and park visits. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. How old was this child? When was Harper's birthday? Roman's hands shook as he did the math. If Harper had been pregnant when she left him. No, he whispered to himself. No way. But the timeline fit. Harper had been tired those last few weeks of their marriage. She'd been sick in the mornings, emotional in ways that seemed extreme even for their failing relationship. Roman had been too busy with investor meetings to notice the signs. Harper stood up from her table, gathering her purse and the lunch she hadn't eaten. Roman watched her walk back toward the office, her phone buzzing with what looked like daycare updates. She moved with the efficient grace of someone juggling multiple responsibilities. Roman's chest felt tight. If Harper had his child, their child, why hadn't she told him? Why hide something so important? The questions multiplied faster than he could process them. Back at the office, Roman couldn't concentrate. He watched Harper through his glass door, noting details he'd missed before. The way she kept her phone face up on her desk. The small photo tucked into her planner that she glanced at throughout the day. The tired look in her eyes despite her professional composure. "Harper," he called out around 4 p.m. "Could you come in here?" She appeared in his doorway with her notepad, ready for whatever task he'd throw at her. "Yes, Mr. Callahan? Do you have any children?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. Harper's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked like panic. "I'm sorry, but I don't think that's appropriate workplace conversation." "You're right. I apologize." Roman's voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. "It's just, you seem like someone who would be good with kids." Harper's smile was forced. "If there's nothing else, I should get back to work." Roman made a decision that would change everything. He was going to follow her home. Roman had never been to Harper's neighborhood in Queens. The subway ride felt like traveling to another planet. Roman, who owned 3 luxury cars and usually traveled by private car service, found himself crammed between commuters on the 7 train, following Harper's route home. She lived in Astoria, in a pre-war building with fire escapes and window boxes. The neighborhood was alive with families, kids playing on stoops, and the smell of dinner cooking from dozens of different cultures. It was the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names and borrowed sugar from each other. Roman parked his Tesla across the street from Harper's building, feeling like a stalker, but unable to stop himself. He needed to know the truth. At 6:30 p.m., Harper emerged from the building with an older Hispanic woman and a small figure that made Roman's breath catch. Even from across the street, he could see the child's dark hair and the way he bounced when he walked. The boy looked about 2 years old. Roman's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. 2 years old. The math was impossible to ignore now. Harper knelt down to the boy's level, adjusting his jacket and kissing his forehead. The gesture was so tender, so maternal, that Roman felt his chest crack open. This was Harper as he'd never seen her. Soft, nurturing, completely focused on someone else's needs. The older woman handed Harper a small backpack covered in cartoon characters. They chatted for a few minutes in Spanish and English, and Roman caught fragments. "Very good today, ate all his lunch, asking for you." Harper lifted the boy into her arms, and he wrapped his tiny arms around her neck. They walked toward the building together, the boy chattering in the excited way toddlers do when they're telling their favorite person about their day. Roman sat in his car, watching them disappear into the building. Minutes later, a light came on in a third-floor window. He could see Harper moving around what looked like a small kitchen, the boy sitting at a table that was just his size. This was Harper's real life. Not the polished professional who worked in his office, but a single mother in Queens, making dinner for her son and probably wondering how she'd pay for daycare next month. Roman thought about his penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture. He thought about the silence that filled those rooms, the way his footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. He thought about the wedding ring hanging around his neck and the life he'd lost. If that little boy was his son. Roman's phone buzzed with work emails, but he ignored them. For once, something was more important than business. He needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed him. As Roman sat in his car, Harper appeared at her window. For a moment, their eyes met across the street. The next morning, Roman was waiting by Harper's desk with coffee and questions. "We need to talk," he said, placing a cup of her favorite coffee, cream, 2 sugars, cinnamon, on her desk. Harper looked at the coffee, then at Roman's face. "About what?" "About why you know exactly how I like my coffee. About why you've never asked where anything is in my office. About why you flinch every time I say your name." Roman's voice was controlled, but Harper could hear the strain underneath. About why Harper Callahan disappeared from the internet at exactly the same time Harper Green appeared. Harper set down her purse with deliberate care. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because I spent last night doing research. Deep research. And the woman sitting in front of me legally changed her name 18 months ago in a courthouse in Queens. The same courthouse where Harper Callahan finalized her divorce from Roman Callahan." The words hung between them like a challenge. Harper's professional mask was cracking, revealing the woman underneath. Tired, scared, and caught. "So what if I did?" Harper's voice was quieter now, more like the woman he'd married. People change their names all the time. Not people who end up working for their ex-husbands by accident. It wasn't by accident. The admission slipped out before Harper could stop it. Roman felt his world tilt. "What do you mean?" Harper looked around the office, noting the other employees arriving for the day. Can we please not do this here? My office. Now. Harper followed Roman into his private office, closing the door behind them. The glass walls that usually made Roman feel powerful now felt like a fishbowl. How long have you known? Harper asked. Since yesterday. The question is, how long have you known? Since the moment I walked in here. Harper's shoulders sagged. I knew exactly who you were, Roman. I knew this was your company, your office, your life. Then why? Why take this job? Why put us both through this? Harper was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. Because I needed the money. Because this job pays twice what I was making at my old place. Because my son needs health insurance and daycare and food, and I couldn't afford to be proud anymore. There it was. The truth Roman had been circling around for days. Your son. Roman's voice was carefully neutral. How old is he? Roman don't. How old is he, Harper? He's 2. The number hit Roman like a physical blow. 2 years old. Born 9 months after Harper left him. What's his name? Roman, please. What's his name? Harper's eyes filled with tears. Elijah. His name is Elijah. And his father? Harper looked up at Roman, and he saw his own eyes reflected back at him. You know who his father is? Roman's phone rang, cutting through the tension. The caller ID showed his lawyer's name. Don't answer it, Harper said. But Roman was already reaching for the phone. I have to. Just as Harper was about to tell him everything, Roman's phone rang. It was his lawyer with devastating news. Someone had betrayed Roman, and all evidence pointed to Harper. Roman, you need to see this immediately. His lawyer's voice was tight with urgency. Someone leaked internal documents to the press. The Times is running a story about toxic workplace culture at Caltech. They're quoting anonymous sources about emotional abuse and financial manipulation. Roman's blood ran cold. What kind of documents? Performance reviews, HR complaints, internal emails. Someone with high-level access leaked everything. Roman looked at Harper, who was staring at him with growing concern. How bad is it? Bad enough that the board is demanding an emergency meeting. Bad enough that 3 major clients are threatening to pull out. Roman, they're calling for your resignation. Roman hung up and immediately called his head of security. I need to know who accessed our internal servers in the last week. Everything. Email logs, file downloads, security badge scans. Harper stood up from her chair. Roman, what's going on? Someone with access to confidential files just destroyed my company. Roman's voice was cold, professional. Someone who knew exactly what would hurt the most. I don't understand. The leak came from an executive assistant's login. Someone who had access to HR files, performance reviews, and my personal correspondence. Roman's eyes met Harper's. Someone who might have had a reason to want revenge. Harper's face went white. You think I did this? You're the only assistant who's lasted more than a week. You're the only one who knew the system well enough to find these files. And you're the only one with a personal grudge against me. Roman, I would never. You lied to me about who you were. You've been lying for weeks. Why should I believe you now? Harper's hands shook as she reached for her purse. Because I'm not that person anymore. Because I needed this job. Because I would never do anything to hurt you, even after everything that happened between us. Roman's phone buzzed with a text from his board chairman. Emergency meeting in 1 hour. Bring your lawyer. Security is on their way up, Roman said, not looking at Harper. They'll need to escort you out while we investigate. You're firing me? I'm protecting my company. Harper's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. I didn't leak those files, Roman, but I understand why you have to do this. As security appeared at the door, Harper gathered her things with quiet dignity. But as they escorted her toward the elevator, she turned back to Roman. The person who did this knows you better than you think. They knew exactly which wounds to open. As security escorted Harper out, she whispered something that made Roman question everything he thought he knew. What would you do if you discovered your ex might be hiding something life-changing? Share your thoughts below. The truth about the leak was hiding in plain sight. Roman spent the next 3 hours in emergency meetings, watching his company's stock price plummet and his board members' confidence disappear. The leaked documents painted him as a tyrant who drove employees to break down and manipulated contracts for personal gain. But something bothered Roman about the leak. The person who did this knew his vulnerabilities too well. They knew which HR complaints would look worst, which emails would be most damaging, which performance reviews would make him look like a monster. Mr. Callahan, Janet from HR knocked on his door. I found something you need to see. She handed him a security report showing login activity from the past month. Roman's eyes scanned the data, looking for Harper's access patterns. This doesn't make sense, Roman said. Harper accessed these files 2 weeks ago, but the leak happened yesterday. Why would she wait? That's not the weird part, Janet said. Look at this. She pointed to another set of login records. Someone else accessed the same files yesterday morning. Someone with administrative privileges who knew exactly what they were looking for. Roman studied the username. Who is Esta Green? That's Simone Green. She was an intern here last summer. She's also listed as Harper's emergency contact. Roman felt like he'd been punched. Harper's emergency contact, her younger sister, according to the file. She still has system access from her internship that was never revoked. Roman's mind raced. Harper had a sister who'd worked at Caltech, who knew the system, who had access to everything. A sister who might have reasons to hate Roman for hurting Harper. Give me everything we have on Simone Green, Roman said. 20 minutes later, Roman was staring at a file that changed everything. Simone Green, 21 years old, had been a summer intern in his marketing department. Her performance reviews were stellar, but her internship had ended abruptly when she'd been caught accessing files outside her clearance level. Roman remembered the incident now. A young woman who'd been asking too many questions about his personal life, who'd seemed to know more about his schedule than she should have. He dismissed her as curious but harmless, but the timing was suspicious. Simone's internship had ended just 1 week before Harper started working for him. Almost like it had been planned, Roman pulled up security footage from the past week. There, on camera, was Simone Green entering the building using a visitor's badge. She'd signed in as Harper's sister, meeting her for lunch. But the timestamp showed Simone had stayed in the building for 2 hours, long enough to access files, download documents, and plan her revenge. Roman's phone rang. Harper's number. Roman, I need to tell you something about my sister. Harper's voice was urgent. She's been asking questions about you, about Caltech. I think she might have already figured it out, Roman said. But Harper, using this information to clear your name will destroy your family. Roman found evidence that would clear Harper's name, but using it would destroy her family. He had to choose. Roman wasn't prepared for what he found in Harper's apartment. The door to the modest Queen's apartment opened, and Roman came face to face with a 4-year-old boy who had his own dark hair and stubborn chin. The child clutched a toy robot and stared up at Roman with curious brown eyes that looked exactly like the ones Roman saw in the mirror every morning. Mommy, there's a man at the door, the boy called over his shoulder. Harper appeared in the doorway, her face pale with shock. Roman, what are you doing here? I came to apologize for not believing you about the leak. Roman's voice caught in his throat as he looked between Harper and the child. But I think we need to talk about more than just work. Harper stepped aside, letting Roman into the small living room. The space was warm and lived in, with children's books scattered on the coffee table and crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. It was everything Roman's sterile penthouse wasn't. This is my son, Mason, Harper said quietly. Mason, this is Roman. Mason tilted his head, studying Roman with the serious expression of a child trying to figure out a puzzle. Do you work with my mom? Something like that. Roman managed, his heart hammering against his ribs. Mason, why don't you go play in your room for a few minutes? The grown-ups need to talk. As soon as Mason disappeared down the hallway, Roman turned to Harper. How old is he? 4. He'll be 5 in November. Roman did the math in his head. November would put Mason's birthday exactly 9 months after their last night together as a married couple. The night before Harper had filed for divorce. Why didn't you tell me? Roman's voice was barely above a whisper. Harper sank onto the couch, looking suddenly exhausted. Because I knew what you'd do. You'd have stayed married out of obligation, not love. You'd have resented both of us eventually. That's not your choice to make, isn't it? You made it clear that your company was more important than our marriage. Why would I think a baby would change that? Roman stared at the crayon drawings on the refrigerator. One showed a stick figure family with me and Mommy, written in shaky letters. No daddy figure anywhere in the picture. I had a right to know I had a son. You had a right to a lot of things, Roman. But rights don't always equal what's best for everyone involved. From the bedroom came the sound of Mason playing with his toys, making sound effects for some imaginary adventure. Roman's chest felt tight thinking about all the bedtime stories he'd missed, all the first words and first steps that had happened without him. I looked for you after the divorce, Roman said. I wanted to explain, to try to fix things. I know. That's why I changed my name and moved here. I needed space to figure out how to be a mom without leaning on you. And now, Harper was quiet for a long moment. Now I'm scared every day that I made the wrong choice. That Mason will grow up wondering why his father wasn't around. Roman knelt down in front of Harper, taking her hands in his. What if I told you that everything I built, everything I achieved, feels empty compared to what I lost when you left? I'd say it's too late for pretty words. What if I told you it's not words I'm offering? As Roman held his son for the first time, Harper revealed the real reason she'd taken the job. She was dying. Have you ever wondered what happens when the person who broke your heart becomes the only one who can save your career? Would you forgive someone who hid your child to protect you? Comment yes or a no below. Harper had been living on borrowed time. The medical file sat on Harper's kitchen table like a bomb waiting to explode. Roman's hands shook as he read the diagnosis. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. Treatment ongoing. Prognosis uncertain. How long have you known? Roman asked, his voice hollow. 8 months. Right around the time I started planning to come back into your life. Roman looked up from the papers, his eyes searching Harper's face for signs he should have noticed. The slight weight loss he'd attributed to stress. The way she sometimes gripped the edge of her desk when she thought no one was looking. The job. Working for me again. This was all because you're sick? Harper nodded slowly. I wanted Mason to know his father before it might be too late. I thought if I could just work for you, help you remember the good parts of who you used to be, maybe you'd be ready to be the dad he needs. And you were going to do this without telling me about the cancer. I was going to tell you eventually, when the time was right. Roman laughed bitterly. When would that time be, Harper? When you were in the hospital? When Mason was asking why Mommy wasn't coming home? I don't know. Harper's voice broke. I just know that I can't do this alone anymore. The treatments are getting harder, and Mason asks questions I don't know how to answer. Roman stood up and paced the window, looking out at the busy Queen Street below. Normal families were going about their normal lives, completely unaware that his entire world had just shifted on its axis. What's the treatment plan? Chemotherapy twice a week. Surgery in 3 months if the tumors shrink enough. After that, Harper shrugged. We'll see. We'll see. Roman turned back to face her. That's not good enough. I want to talk to your doctors. I want to know every option, every specialist, every experimental treatment available. Roman, I can't afford. Money isn't an issue. It never was, and it never will be. Roman sat back down next to Harper. I lost you once because I was too proud and too stupid to fight for what mattered. I'm not making that mistake again. What are you saying? I'm saying that Mason needs his mother, and I need you to be okay. Harper's eyes filled with tears. What if I'm not? What if the treatment doesn't work? Roman made a promise that would cost him everything he'd built. Roman walked into the boardroom, knowing he might not walk out as CEO. The emergency board meeting had been called for 2 p.m. sharp. 12 of the most powerful investors in Manhattan sat around the polished conference table, their faces grim with the weight of scandal. Roman had asked Harper to stay home with Mason, but she'd insisted on being there. Roman, board chairman Davidson began, we need to address the allegations in the leaked memo. The accusations of emotional manipulation and hostile work environment are serious. I understand your concerns, Roman said, standing at the head of the table. But I'm here to tell you that Harper Green is innocent of leaking anything. The evidence suggests otherwise. Board member Patricia Williams interjected. Her access to your private communications Her history of... Her history of what? Roman's voice cut through the room like a blade. Her history of being my ex-wife? Her history of being the mother of my child? Her history of battling cancer while trying to provide for our son? The room fell silent. Roman had their attention now, and he wasn't going to waste it. Harper Green and Harper Callahan are the same person. She's been working for me under an assumed name because she was trying to find a way to tell me I have a 4-year-old son. David Chun leaned forward. Are you telling us that you've been employing your ex-wife without disclosing this conflict of interest? I'm telling you that I've been employing the most competent assistant I've ever had. Someone who increased my productivity by 40% and prevented 3 major client disasters in the past month. This is highly irregular, Patricia said. The optics alone. The optics. Roman slammed his hand on the table. A woman is fighting for her life while trying to protect her child's future, and you're worried about optics? Harper stood up from her chair in the corner. Roman, don't do this. Don't sacrifice your company for me. It's not a sacrifice if it's worth it. Roman turned back to the board. I know who leaked the memo. It was Harper's sister, Simone Davis, my former intern. She was jealous of Harper's position and wanted to cause trouble. Can you prove this? David asked. Roman pulled out his phone and played a recorded conversation. Simone's voice filled the room, confessing to accessing Harper's computer and sending the memo to the press. The evidence was clear and damning. This clears Harper of any wrongdoing, Roman continued. But it doesn't change the fact that I misled this board about my relationship with an employee. What are you proposing? Patricia asked. I'm proposing that you either accept my judgment in this matter or you accept my resignation. Because I won't run a company that values reputation over truth. As Roman faced the consequences of his choice, Harper made a decision that surprised everyone. Harper refused to let Roman fight alone. Stop, Harper said, stepping forward to address the board directly. Roman doesn't need to resign, and you don't need to worry about your precious company reputation. The board members exchanged glances, clearly not expecting Harper to speak up. With all due respect, Ms. Green, David began. It's Mrs. Callahan, Harper corrected firmly. And I have something to say about this situation. Roman looked at Harper with surprise. She'd never used his last name during their marriage, preferring to keep her own identity. Hearing it now, in this moment, felt like a declaration of war. Roman made mistakes in our marriage. He prioritized work over family, and I left him because of it. But the man standing here today isn't the same person I divorced 2 years ago. Harper walked to the front of the room, standing beside Roman. This company has a 40% increase in client satisfaction since I started working here. Revenue is up 30%. You want to fire the CEO who achieved those numbers because he fell in love with his assistant. The situation is more complex than that, Patricia said. No, it's not. It's exactly that simple. Harper pulled out her phone and opened a folder of screenshots. Simone Davis sent me these messages over the past month. She was angry that I got the assistant position she wanted. She was jealous of my relationship with Roman. She admitted to accessing my computer and sending that memo. Roman stared at Harper in amazement. You had evidence this whole time? I was protecting my family, Harper said. Simone is my sister, and I thought I could handle it privately. But I won't let her destroy your life because of her jealousy. David Chun studied the messages on Harper's phone. This is compelling evidence, but the board still has concerns about the professional relationship between you and Roman. Then let me address those concerns, Harper said. Roman offered me a job, and I took it. I worked harder than any assistant you've ever seen, and I delivered results. The fact that we have a personal history doesn't change the quality of my work. What about the conflict of interest? Patricia asked. What conflict? I made Roman more successful, not less. I helped him become the leader you hired him to be. Roman felt something shift in his chest. Harper wasn't just defending him. She was defending them as a team. There's something else you should know, Harper continued. I am sick. I have cancer, and I'm fighting for my life. I took this job because I wanted my son to know his father before it might be too late. Roman didn't know about Mason until this week. The room fell silent. Even the most hardened business people couldn't ignore the weight of Harper's words. I'm asking you to judge Roman on his results, not on his personal life. And I'm asking you to understand that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in boardrooms. Roman reached for Harper's hand. We're stronger together than apart, in business and in life. The final board meeting would determine not just Roman's fate, but their future as a family. The boardroom had never seen a battle like this. Davidson called for a 15-minute recess to allow the board to deliberate. Roman and Harper stepped into the hallway, their hands still intertwined, waiting for a decision that would change everything. You didn't have to do that, Roman said quietly. Yes, I did. We're a team, remember? That's what teams do. When the board reconvened, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Davidson stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. We've reviewed the evidence regarding the leaked memo. Simone Davis has been terminated from her consulting position with Call Tech, effective immediately. Harper squeezed Roman's hand tighter. As for the allegations against Roman Callahan, we find them to be without merit. The evidence clearly shows that Harper Callahan was not the source of the leak, and her work performance has been exemplary. Roman felt his shoulders relax slightly, but David wasn't finished. However, the board does have concerns about the lack of disclosure regarding your personal relationship. Understand, Roman said. What are your recommendations? Patricia Williams spoke up. We're requiring full disclosure of any personal relationships between executives and employees going forward. This includes a formal HR review of the current situation. Additionally, David continued, we're recommending that Harper be promoted to Executive Operations Manager with appropriate compensation and benefits. Her contributions to the company have been significant. Harper looked shocked. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Roman whispered. There's one more thing, David said. Roman, we're extending your contract as CEO for another 5 years. Your leadership during this crisis has shown the kind of character we want representing Call Tech. Roman felt like he could breathe again for the first time in weeks. Thank you for trusting me. Don't thank us yet. The press is still running with the story. You'll need to do damage control. I can handle the press, Roman said. I've got help now. As the board members filed out of the conference room, Roman and Harper stood alone in the space where their future had been decided. Executive Operations Manager? Harper raised an eyebrow. That's quite a promotion. You earned it. You've been running half my operations since day one. What about Mason? What about my treatment? We'll figure it out. Together. Roman reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I've been carrying this for 2 years. Harper's eyes widened as Roman opened the box, revealing the engagement ring she'd left behind. I'm not asking you to marry me again, Roman said. I'm asking you to marry me for the first time, the right way, as equals, as partners. As they left the boardroom victorious, Roman had one more surprise for Harper. Roman had learned that some things are worth more than empires. 6 months later, Roman stood in the same courthouse in Raleigh, North Carolina, where Harper had filed for divorce. But this time, they were there for a different reason. Do you, Roman Callahan, take Harper to be your wife, to love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? Edo. Roman's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving Harper's face. Do you, Harper Callahan, take Roman to be your husband, to love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? Edo. Harper's voice was strong, despite the chemo treatments that had left her thinner but not weaker. Mason stood beside them as ring bearer, proudly holding the rings they'd chosen together. The same rings they'd worn years before, but this time with different promises behind them. You may kiss the bride. Roman kissed Harper softly, tasting salt from her tears and his own. When they broke apart, Mason tugged on Roman's jacket. Are you my daddy now? I've always been your daddy, Roman said, lifting Mason into his arms. I just didn't know it yet. The small ceremony was attended by only a few close friends and Harper's parents, who had flown in from Charlotte. Simone wasn't there. She'd moved to California after losing her job, and Harper had made it clear that trust once broken, wasn't easily repaired. But forgiveness was different from trust, and Harper was learning that lesson daily. After the ceremony, the three of them walked to a nearby park where Roman had prepared a picnic. It was simple, nothing like the lavish wedding they'd had the first time around. "I have something for you," Roman said, pulling out a manila envelope. Harper opened it to find legal documents. "What is this?" "It's the deed to a house in Westchester. Nothing too big, but it has a good school district and a backyard where Mason can play." "Roman, we can afford anything we want. Caltech had its best quarter ever, and your cancer treatment is responding better than the doctors expected." Harper looked at the pictures of the house, her eyes filling with tears. "It's perfect. There's something else." Roman pulled out another envelope. "It's a business proposal. I want you to be my partner in everything. 50-50 ownership of Caltech." "Are you serious?" "I'm serious about building something that lasts. Not just a company, but a legacy for Mason." 1 year later, Roman and Harper's company was thriving, but more importantly, so was their family. Harper's cancer was in remission. Mason had started kindergarten, and Roman had learned that the best investments weren't measured in dollars. Love isn't about perfect timing. It's about fighting for what matters. What's your story of second chances? Share below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove love conquers all.